Okay, we're back. I know what you're thinking. You're like, cool, we're all excited. We should just move forward from here and start simming because it's fun. But not yet. And I'll tell you why. We want to make this two things we want to do. Well, first, we want to make it more brick-like and less gooey. So we're going to need to know if we want to flatten it. I'm just going to tell you right now, these are going to be options. So we're going to make a little switch here called, whether we flatten or not, flatten or not. And then on top of that, we're also going to make a switch for whether or not we polyreduce. In other words, we're going to do a polyreduce to reduce the number of polygons. I know we already did with the adaptivity, we can actually get a little bit better. But again, we aren't always going to want to do that. We will in the case of the bricks. We might not want to in the case of stones. We want to make that an option, so we do a little switch guy. I'll tell you right now, these guys are going to be things to do that. So let's go ahead and bubble those up. I'm going to do a little manual, and even though we haven't hooked them up to anything yet, I'm going to go ahead and give their right click, go down to type and properties. I'm going to go ahead and bring them in here. So what did we call those? I already forgot. We want to know if we want to flatten or not, so that starts on F. There it is, flatten or not. Again, this is all part of polygon creation, right? So I'm going to put that in there. And I'll just say flatten with a question mark. Whoops, flatten with a question mark. I'll make it a toggle somewhere. Toggle. Then the other one is going to be, what did I say it was going to be? Oh, whether or not we polyreduce, whether we do, polyreduction and so forth. And I'm just going to call that, I guess we'll just call it polyreduce. So that's going to be under our should we polyreduce. Going to tell the select input. So whether or not we flatten, and now this is going to be polyreduce. Putting it polyreduce, question mark. And when we do polyreduce, there's probably going to be an option, like how many points or whatever. So let's just go ahead and throw that in now. I would normally bubble up, but we've done this before. You know, when you polyreduce it, there's a, like the percentage you keep or whatever it's called. I'm sure you guys have done this before, but so I'm just going to say polyreduce percentage. I kind of want to put in whole words here, but Houdini tends to, like if you're more than a number of characters, it does this silly thing where it does dot dot dot, and I don't want to do that. So here we have flatten, here we have polyreduce percentage. We have more characters going to do that. Also, polyreduce obviously should be a toggle. So let's go ahead and in our guy here for polyreduce, that is, where's our toggle? Toggle. Polyreduce percentage, I'm going to call that polyreduce percent. See if we can fit all that in there. I know we're not software makers, so we shouldn't be all paranoid about how things look, but I like how things look. Okay, for this one, we are going to flatten and polyreduce, and we'll do a polyreduction 20% or something. I don't know. We'll find out when we get in there. So I'm going to turn this back on to auto update, and we're going to dive in there once it's finished doing its thing. And what we're going to do is hook these guys up. So we're going to say, normally we don't flatten, and then normally we don't polyreduce, but sometimes we will. Okay, so how about the how do we actually flatten stuff part? Kind of skipped over the important thing. I actually do this a lot where you make the parameters for stuff before you actually make the thing sometimes. And the reason is so you can start getting in the minds of the person using it, not the person making it. My big problem with anybody that makes anything is you start thinking of how it gets created and not how it gets used. And that's why, remember back in the day, they used to have multiple remotes that would have VCRs that would have the sound, the eject button on them, but when you're in TV mode, you couldn't eject, stupid stuff like that. So I like to think of it from the outside first. So now it's actually created. What we're going to do is we're going to make an attribute VOP. And this guy is going to be run over, well, I guess that's a point VOP. I was going to say, I want to run it over points, so does that make it a point VOP? Point VOP? Maybe it's a typing problem. There's still a point VOP, okay. These guys, by the way, attribute VOP and a point VOP, notice they're really the same. They just change whether or not it runs over points. I should just call it a point bop because I know what it is. But this is going to become our flattener. Flattener? Flattener. Flattener. Good Lord, man. So when we do flatten, that's what we'll do. Okay, so how do we flatten things? That, my friend, is a very good question. Here's what I think. We're going to take... Well, first place, the only thing we're going to do is stuff in Z. So we're going to take Z and we're going to do some horrible things to it. The other two dimensions, we're not going to do anything to. So first thing I'm going to do, and let's make some space, is I'm going to do a float to vector. And we're only going to screw with Z. Dunk. Okay, so what do we want to do with Z? And I'll tell you what we want to do. We want to fit it in between a range, between a minimum and a maximum. Let's go ahead and put a fit down. And it's funny because I always get confused here because I'm kind of a moron. So even though this is a simple thing, it's going to be confusing in a moment. We're going to give it a, we're just going to promote these parameters. We're going to, between a min and a max, we want it to go between, here's where we want to say 0, 1. I'm going to say -1 and 1. We're just getting kind of a normalized Z, right? And the thing we're going to do to it, we want to do symmetrically on both sides. So we're going to flatten here and flatten here the same way. This is why I get confused. These amounts we do is we want to say wherever the minimum Z is and the maximum Z is going to be 1 over here, -1 over here, or vice versa, whichever way it goes. And we're going to do symmetrically the same thing on either side. So step 1, up here where we have our guys, let's just go ahead and edit this. We could make this, I'm going to actually just do it simply. We should make this, if we were going to do this more than once, I would make it a digital asset and blah, 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 blah. But instead, I'm just going to simplify things. Take this stuff that we're not going to mess with and make it invisible. And then this guy we're just going to call Z-min. This guy we're going to call Z-max. Okay, apply, accept. So we got our Z-min and our Z-max. What are Z-min and our Z-max, by the way? Well, they're the, whatever the Z-min and Z-max this guy is. They're, you know, negative blah, 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 and blippy, blah, blah, blurp. And point is, we're not just going to write it down because it's going to be different the next time somebody makes a bigger wall or something. So we need it to be the bounding box of something. Don't know what yet because I haven't thought that far ahead. I'm going to use the Z-min of it. Okay, now it's like that far ahead. What's the bounding box? What's the something? We could say rounded, but I'm going to go crazy and actually do the thing I didn't do before, which is op input path of me input 0th. So that should give us the Z-min of the guy that's in our first input. Seems a little strange. I'll do the same thing for Z-max. Benefit of this is even though I'm not making it a digital asset, if I do want to use this later on, or more likely if I want to connect this to, like if I put a null in there or some other silly thing, it'll automatically work and update and be beautiful. So I'm going to leave that there like that. Okay, so that's a normalized Z. So we're all excited, we're all happy. Now, what do I want to do to that? Normally, that's going to go from 0 to 1 in kind of a whatever way it goes, and we want to stretch it out, and we want to do it symmetrically. So this is where it gets confusing. I'm just going to take the absolute value of it, right? So now instead of being between -1 and 1, it's just a 0 to 1 thing. And to remember whether it was -1 or 1 later on, I'm going to take the sign over here and save it. Okay, then I'm going to do nasty things to this. Oops, not that nasty. We're going to do something to this, and then we'll multiply it back with the sign, and then we'll be done. So your next question is, what are we going to do, Jeff? The answer is, we now have a nifty 0 to 1 range stuff, right? This is, you know, oh man, ran out of 10 minutes. Okay, quickly, 0 to 1, and I'll just tell you right now, we're going to do a ramp parameter. And the reason we're going to do a ramp parameter is because it's going to be cool. We're going to put that in. We're going to say this is a spline ramp. And whatever the heck comes out of that, that's what we're going to multiply our sine by afterwards. So the result of that goes back into being our, -1 or 1. And then we're going to fit in reverse that back to, now it's -1 to 1. We want to fit it back to the range of the, it's honestly easier to do than to say. It's fit between -1 and 1. We want from -1 and 1 back to the Z-min, Z-max. Okay, what was the Z-min, Z-max? Well, it's these guys. We're going to actually expose these guys. That's the Z-min and the Z-max. This is where I get confused. Don't get confused and put a max on top. Let's get the min here. So the min is going to go here. The max is going to go here. And because we know it's evil to have lines to go through boxes, because we're all OCD about that, that's our final Z. And the reason I'm excited about that, the reason that's exciting, come up here, this guy, our thing, if we leave it alone, nothing happens. Exciting, right? But you gotta watch closely. If we do take that ramp, and let's say we make a point bonk here, yoink, you can kind of see what's happening there. We can flatten it crazily, or just flatten it a little bit, or not flatten it at all. Nifty, huh? Okay, great. That's our flattener. Come back for the next lesson.